welcome to this virtual tutorial classroom. Today we will discuss on the topic communication. As you all are aware about this topic, I hope you all are aware about this topic, like this communication. Communication is why we have to study this communication. As you all are every day, you are talking with your friends, you are discussing with your friends, you are passing on messages, even many times now you all are using this WhatsApp, like giving some messages to your friends. So, any way when you are giving some information to someone, that is called the communication. That is called the communication. But why we have to study about this topic? What is the relevance of this topic? Because unless until we express our feelings, unless until we pass on our messages, unless until we say something to someone, then the other person will not interact with us. The other person will not understand what we are saying. That is a biggest problem with us. So, to express something, to express your feelings, to express your ideas, to express your thoughts, we are trying to say something to others, that is called the communication, and which is essential in the organizations, which is also essential for our day to day life. Because without communication we may not be able to start up any work, or we may not be able to do any work, we may not be able to create our friendship, or we may not be able to understand the other person. And when it comes to the organizational level, like in organization, many people are working in different platforms. Unless until one communicate with the other department, unless until one pass on the information to the other people, then at the hierarchical level it is very difficult to handle different types of work. So, that is why we need to understand how this communication is basically happens, and what is the importance lies in that, what are the processes involved in the communication process, and how we can do it in an effective manner. Because communication is something which it means, like when the other side of the person, when the other person understands you, when the other person could be able to reply to your information or your message, then only the communication will be successful. Many times we are talking, but the other side of the people to whom we are talking, that person may not be able to understand us. So, what are the forms of expressions, like what are the languages we are using, what are the wordings we are using to say something. Like many times we may not use the words, we are only doing the gesture like this, like that, okay, like this, okay. These are certain gestures when we are showing, that also gives some messages to your friends, that also may pass on the messages to the other person. Like in basically in the army troops, they generally sometimes do some gestures and pass on the messages. They create some sounds which will be giving some messages to the other troop. So, many forms are there through which we have to express ourselves, through which we have to express ourselves. So, it is very much important for a student to understand about the communication process, to understand about the way we have to communicate in the organizations in our day to day life, and what are the different forms of communications are there, and how the communication affects basically in the organizational level. So, let us first understand the concepts of the communication. So, what is this meaning? This particular term communication is derived from the Latin word that is called communis, means common. to share with others. Common means like which is not having any secrecy. When something is told to people, when something is shared with the people, some messages, some informations, some knowledge, some ideas, some messages which you have like you want to pass on to your friends. So, when it is coming to the to others, when it is reaching to the others, then that is common to all, there is no secrecy. So, communication is something which you know, you have to share with somebody, you have to talk, you have to say to someone about the particular incident or the event or the some particular work activity. Unless until you say to the other people, then it will be a secrecy to the individual. So, when it is becoming common, when other people could able to know about some informations, then it becomes common. So, that is what the meaning the term communication, which is derived from the Latin word communis, it says that it is common to all the information, all the communication which is happening through media, which is happening through discussions, which is happening through any other channels, that is common to all, because there is no secrecy to a particular information or particular message. That is the first meaning which says about this. Then the second aspect is to pass on the information to others. When communication happens, when any information is passes to other persons, then only the communication process is initiated, and when the other people listens to the information, then the communication happens. Because many times we may be passing on the communication, may be giving the information that may not be reaching to the others. So, we will be discussing regarding how it is not reaching to the others, but whatever information we are sharing with others, that is what called communication. Then in other way, it is a process of transmission of information through speaking, writing, symbol, gesturing, using words, figures, charts and graphs. These are certain elements through which we have to communicate with the other people, because whatever we will say, if that will not be understood by others, then there is no communication happens. So, how the communication happens? So, we have to talk to them, we have to speak to them, but how you have to speak to them? You have to either use different languages, as we have different languages. You may now we are talking in English, we are talking in Hindi, we are talking in Odia, Bengali, Telugu, like these are certain languages which can be told to the other persons and which can be used to express the message, then only the other person can understand. So, that is how you know, language is basically used for the speaking aspect. Then writing, we have to also communicate to the people through writing some content. Unless until we write unless until we prepare the writing scripts, so it will not be communicated to others. So, written format is there to communicate to the people. Then symbols, gesturing, by acting also we are passing on some messages without using word, without using any you know, written contents, by showing, by acting through our body postures or by movement of the body, we can also communicate to the people. That is what called the gesturing. Then using words, we have to use certain words, then only we can express our thoughts and feelings. That is how the figures, charts and graphs, many things are used to communicate about our ideas, about our feelings, about certain messages, about some information to the people. Then it is the process of interchanging thoughts, feelings and information for the purpose of mutual understanding. When this communication happens with other person, so how it has to be basically happened? It has happened only through by exchanging the thoughts, by exchanging the thoughts, by expressing the feelings, and by saying some information to the other person, and the other person must require it. Unless until the other person needs that, unless until the other person listens that, then if that person is not replying to your information, then the mutual understanding will not happen. So, communication will be successful when both the party will be involving into the interaction and they will reply to each other, they will reply to each other. That is what called interchanging of the expressions or interchanging of the thoughts, and that is when that is happening, that is also called the communication. So, this is all about the meaning of the communication. But besides this, as we are the students of commerce and business management, let us understand how this business communication is basically happens in the organization. So, is it something different? Is it something different? Because in our day to day life, when we are talking to the people, when we are like this, when you are passing on any information to our friends or our colleagues, that is, you know, in a general term we are communicating with each other. Now, when I am teaching also I am communicating with you. So, so communication, every part of life, every minute of life in our life we are communicating to each other. But in business organizations, there are specific aspects through which the managers, the subordinates, the you can say the all stakeholders, they communicate with each other, like bankers, government organizations, shareholders, they basically communicate with each other. But why they have to communicate? They have to communicate because they are depends on the this commercial activity, and they are depends on the transactions of the business. So, these transactions of the business includes like dealing with the client, providing services, addressing the shareholders, official circulars, notices, interdepartmental communications, like selling, and you know, like communicating through informations to the bankers, government, customers, then suppliers, distributors. When these people are involved into the commercial activity, it is the most essential aspect for a manager to communicate with them. And how to communicate with them? Like many a times, like they basically depends on the written communications. Besides that, when they are interacting with these elements of the business, those who are involved into the process, they are also, the verbal communication is required. Suppose for example, any problem happened with the employee and they are into the strike. So, the manager have to communicate, or they have to counsel the workers regarding the organizational presence, organizational steps for themselves. So, in many ways the communication is required while they are addressing a meeting, while they are conducting the annual general body meeting, AGM meetings, and on day to day basis when they are giving instructions to the subordinates, when the interdepartmental coordination is required. Suppose different departments are as different departments are present for is there to manage different activities, one department must talk to the other department people. So, in that way written communication is highly essential, as well as the verbal communication is also essential. In many ways these communications are happens through circulars, through notices, office orders, you can say the business documents. So, in that way the business communication generally happens in the organizations. So, as we all are the students of commerce and business management, let us we must have a thorough knowledge regarding that how what are the basic communications are required while we are dealing with the business activities. Now, let us understand what is this purpose of communication, why we have to depend on this communication process. The purpose of communication is to inform, and the inform, and the sender wishes that the receiver must be understanding his message. It means when anybody wanted to pass on the message to the others, they must say, they must hope that like the other person who is sitting at outside, or who is listening to him, he must be understanding whatever the sender is passing on the message, or whatever he is communicating to the other person, because that is the first purpose. Unless the person understands the information or the you can say the message, then the communication will be a failure. The purpose of communication means both the party, both the person who are interacting with each other, they must understand what is being told to each other. Unless until they understands that, then communication will be a failure. So, it may be it may be employer employee, it may be the customers, it may be the manager with the subordinates, it may be the business dealings, it may be while the meeting is getting conducted, wherever we are interacting with each other, the sender and receiver must understand each other. That is the first purpose of the communication. Then second aspect is, the second purpose is, it creates the mutual understanding. When something is shared with someone, like the information is shared with the other person, then automatically the understanding between both the party happens, understanding what someone is saying and why he is saying, and the other party also reply to that. In that case, the mutual trust also develops between each other. Like, no, this information is required to me, and which I am getting, that is highly essential for that is highly you can say a good relationship, you can say trust can be maintained between the two party when both are interacting with each other in clear terms. Suppose maybe it may be a business dealings, it may be a you can say while you are counseling your employees, while you are addressing your employees, when both will interact with each other, then mutual understanding it generally happens between the both the party. Then communication is a goal oriented process. When any official message is passed on to the others, then it is passed on for achieving some work, or you know, like instruction when given to the workers that you do this work by this targeted timeline. By this someone is ready to you know, like after listening that, then he is replying that okay, I will do this work by this timeline. It means whenever the communication is given to the people, whenever the any information is given to the people, it may be in the forms of official orders, it may be in the form of official instructions, everything is having some objective and the goals for the organization. It may be a target achievement, it may be some work has to be completed within a certain time period, it may be suppose for example, when the senior manager will say that like our department is into the loss, and by this month you all have to find out other job. This is also a targeted work which is the manager is doing, because many a times the organizations faces loss and they cannot handle the workers, so they have to inform earlier that within 1 month you search for other job. So, that is how any information which is given to the workers, that is goal oriented. Suppose when the people, when the salesperson, when the salesperson is given the target that by the end of the day you have to sell this number of products, that is the targeted targeted that is the target which is given to you. So, when that is told, when that is being told, that it is directly connected with the goals of the organization. When the employees will be told that you have to work from tomorrow till 9 hours, and by the end of the year we have to complete this much of work, or this project, this is the timeline. Everything which is communicated in terms of work, in terms of time, in terms of money, like financial involvement, everything in terms of resource utilization of the resources, then everything is something the organization wanted to achieve. That is what called the goal oriented communications. then every communication is basically affect or influence one's own and another's behavior in some way. When something is being told, suppose in an anger mood you are saying something to someone, automatically the behavioral problem will come. When you are saying something with some reactions, then automatically the other side, the other reactions will be coming to you. So, for that there is a concept called transaction analysis is there to understand the ego level of the interactors. We will discuss in other topic, but let us understand how this influence the others reaction. When your papa will be angry on you, you are also showing your reactions. So, when anything is communicated with a particular behavioral language, then automatically the other side also shows their behaviors. That is how the communication, the purpose of communication means the information should be passed to the other party in such a way the other person's behavior is also getting influenced. Your behavior, like the receiver's behavior is getting influenced, and the the sender's behavior is also getting influenced. That is the purpose of communication. And purpose of communication is basically says that when something is communicated, there must be the reply and the work must be done. That is what the key you can say the key objective of the communication process. Coming to the importance and significance of the communication process, what is the need? Why we have to depend on this communication process? Let us first understand the effective communications is basically requires to handle the employees at different levels. As I have discussed with you, as in the organizations, different departments are there, different various types of activities are there. So, one individual is responsible for one type of work. So, one department is responsible for one type of work. So, in that way like the different departments, they are basically coordinate with each other, they talk with each other, they pass on the informations with each other, then only the because entire organization as a whole they have to work for a single work, they have to achieve a single goal. So, to achieve the single goal, then the entire whole department, the entire whole organization have to depend on the different departmental activities, and they have to coordinate with each other. For coordination purpose, effective communication channels are required, effective communication ways are required. So, there must be the communication flow has to be maintained. Then systematic communication helps to maintain the congenial work environment. If the informations are passed to the different people at right time, at the right you can say right way, then there will not be conflict between the people. So, there will be always a happy environment with the people, that our office is working with a very smooth environment. At any time any information you need, immediately we can get it. Nowadays, as you are the students of this IT era, you must be knowing that by sitting in your chamber also you will be getting all informations about the office, because it is connected with the network system. Electronically we can get the informations easily. Besides that, departmental coordinations will be there, which will help the organization to run in a smooth manner. So, one officer will not waste their time from here and there to get the informations. So, that is the biggest, you can say the best system which nowadays it is taken care in the different establishment. Then good communication results in the in increased productivity. When the communication will be good, when the informations are easily reached to the different levels of the workers, then their productivity enhances, because time saving will be there and that is highly economical, because wastage of money and wastage of energy will not be there, and documentation can be done properly at right time. So, it will expedite their expedite their way of doing the work, and that will enrich their working style, that will enrich their working style, and they can do the maximum work whatever is given to them. After that they can also put some extra effort to comply more work in a day. So, that is why it helps in increasing the productivity. Then it facilitates the good communication system facilitates coordination and cooperation among different work groups. If the good communication system will be there, then people will coordinate with each other very easily and they cooperate to get the things done, and you can say every work group informs their status to the other work group, and they work in a very smooth manner and complete the work within the time schedule. Then effective communication basically brings the mutual trust between the employer and employee. If something will be kept hide, something secrecy will be maintained in the organization, then employee will not have the trust on the employer. So, it is the responsibility of the employer, they have to maintain the good communication system. Suppose some profit is they are getting, they got some profit, then that will be immediately told to the employees, so that they feel elevated that due to their effort the organization is getting profit. So, they must be having the trust that okay, our boss is sharing this news with us. So, they feel confident about their effort, they feel confident about the organizational functioning. So, that is how the employer and employee relationship will be maintained in a smooth manner. There will be no conflict, there will be no distrust between the employer and employee. That is how the effective communication is creating a good impact, you can say create a good environment, working environment within the organization. Then regular exchange of information between trade unions brings healthy relationship. As worker groups are highly influential in the different organizations, so it is the most important responsibility of the senior managers. They have to exchange information, they have to you can say regularly they have to pass on the message. Like for example, recently TCS had announced that they are into the like some loss they have faced into the last quarter. Immediately that came in the newspaper. You must be seeing all the news which is coming in the newspaper, like Infosys, TCS, Wipro, everyone is supplying the information that whatever profit they are getting, they are supplying the information, whatever loss they are facing, they are supplying the information. It is not the only the benefit of the organization, it is the benefit for the common public, it is the benefit for the employees, because if they will see that their organization is facing the loss, like recently Tata Motors, whatever loss they have faced in this last quarter. So, immediately that is shared with the shared to the shared through the media. So, in that way they are bringing confidence, amongst the employee, they are bringing confidence with the amongst the shareholders. So, it is highly essential for the business organizations or the different organizations, they have to give regular informations about the organizational establishment, about the organizational profit, about the loss, about the expansion of the organization, about the you can say the merger of the organization. Suppose they wanted to acquire some organization, suppose any share they wanted to issue to the people, disclosure, everything they have to communicate through the proper channel. Maybe paper media is one of the channel, or nowadays in TV also you are seeing those news is coming, because that is highly essential for a organization to maintain the transparency. Then communication skill is highly essential for bringing success to any job. It means when a manager handles in different workplaces, it is highly essential he must be communicable, means he must be having that skill to talk to people. Here communication skill is not the English, you can speak at any language which other people can understand, you can express your ideas, you can talk to people in such a way so that the other person should understand. Where English is required, you have to use the English, but can you use suppose I will say that ami tumako bhalo pache, suppose suppose somebody else will understand that this Bengali, you know, the other party, other person will understand it, then it is you know, it is a clear cut communication which is given to the other person. So, when someone says something, when the manager is expressing something, when that is understood by the subordinates or employees, then that is what called the clear cut communication which is happening in the organizations. So, so a manager must learn how to use the skill in a proper manner, that will bring success to the job, Then it maintains the communication skill maintains the smooth relationship with the government, distributors, investors, bankers, media, you can say all the stakeholders who are connected with the business. So, without connecting them, without informing them regarding the status of the business establishments, then it will not be a very easy task for the organizations to run in a smooth manner. So, it is the responsibility of the business organizations to declare their positions, to express their you can say to inform their financial status, whatever new products they are going to launch, whatever new technology they are going to use. So, though in those aspects that has to be communicated easily. Recently in many organizations they have announced that they are going to replace the manpower through robots, like they wanted to use it. Like before initiating this action, they are also giving this to the media that they are going to replace the manpower. So, these are the most essential aspects of the communication. Let us understand how this communication process is basically takes place. Communication process, let us understand what is this process. Process means it is a flow of information from one person to other person, so which is basically passes through different interrelated stages. So, let us understand this communication process. For a communication, for a smooth communication, there are certain elements which has to be used in the communication process. So, those elements are sender, message, encoding, channel, receiver and decoding. Okay. And decoding, and finally, when these each elements will be connected in such a way, then only the message can be transferred from the sender to the receiver. So, how this process, how this elements is basically works for the communication process. So, what is their role? Let us understand. The first role of the element is the sender's role is like who is the person who wanted to pass on the message, who sends the message. So, that is the first responsibility. Unless the sender is present, then communication will not happen. Who is going to communicate? So, there must be a sender who wanted to pass on the message. Then the second case, like that is the second element is the message. So, what he wanted to pass on the message, the ideas, the feelings, the content, what is the you can say the statement he wanted to pass on to the other party. So, in that stage when the message is basically basically thought of with the sender, he has to try to think, try to plan it, try to use his ideas first. So, he has to conceive these ideas and convert into message, because before saying something we are thinking in our mind. So, immediately we cannot pass on the message, we cannot say this is the message which you have to immediately we have to say to someone. So, one has to design, one has to think in the mind, that is what called encoding. Encoding means whatever we are thinking to pass on to someone, then that will be attaching some meaning, unless until the message is passed on to other person, and if that does not carry any meaning, then that will not be a message. So, any message which you wanted to be passed on to transmit to the other person, then here the encoding will be there, like here the meaning is connected with the message. Then once the meaning will be attached with the message, then now the statement is ready which is need to be communicated to the other person. Then the sender will find out, depends on a channel, which channel he wanted to pass on the message, whether he wanted to directly contact with the other party, whether he wanted to pass on through email, whether to over telephone he wanted to pass on the message, what is the media he will use to pass on the message. Media means the way, the you can say the a particular path through which the message can be transmitted to other party. So, channel has to be there. Then once the channel is decided, then the sender immediately passes the message to the receiver. So, when it reaches to the receiver, it is not easy to immediately the receiver will not immediately receives the message. When it reaches to the receiver, many times he may not reply to that, many times he may not reply to that, but reaching of the message is generally happens to the receiver. And sometimes due to some technical defect, suppose your channel is not proper, then sometimes you may be sending the message, but it is not reaching the receiver. So, for a entire completion of the process, the sender has to see that whether the receiver has received the message or not. Once he is receiving, he is trying to find out the meaning, that is called decoding. That is called decoding. Now, he is trying to find out, attach the meaning, what message is coming to him. Once the decoding will be there, then now he is ready to try to prepare his message. Many times the receiver never reply back to the sender. Like you must be getting the many spam emails, you are not replying to that, you are never replying to those smells. So, in that case, when receiver never reply to the reply to the sender, then the communication will be a failure. When he is ready to reply to the other, when he is ready to reply and he is ready to give the feedback, then the entire communication process will be successful. So, that is the way the receiver gives the feedback to the sender. Again, suppose sender wanted to pass on any more message, again it continues, like the interaction will be going on and it will be a successful one. But when the sender sends the message, again I am repeating, when the sender sends the message and the receiver never replies, those are called one way communication. It means only the sender is sending the message and receiver is not receiving the message, or you can say replying to the sender. But when the reply comes from the receiver and after receiving the message, this is called two-way communication. Means here the sender is the person and here is the receiver is the person, both the party interacted with each other, each other and the feedback is basically receives from the receiver, and this is what called the two-way communication, because both the parties are involved into the process, and these are like this sender, message, encoding, channel, receiver, decoding, message. These are the elements which are basically used in different stages while the communication between two parties generally takes place. So, this is what the elements of communication. Then now, let us understand the forms of communication. There are 4 forms of communications are generally happens in the organizations or in a general day to day life. One is the formal and informal communication, then oral and written communication, verbal and non-verbal communication, intrapersonal and interpersonal communication. These are different forms of communication generally happens between the people, or you can say in the offices, in the organizations, in our day to day life. So, what is this formal communications? formal communications are the information flow through the established channels of organization. It means these are formal communications are all official communications, like while you are writing a circular to circular in the office, while you are communicating all the employees through a circular, that is a official communication. While you are writing memos, then that is a official circulation. Any letter when you are communicating to the different parties, then or different offices, that is the official communication. Office orders, that is also a official communication. When you are inviting tenders, that is also a official communication. So, these are certain, you know, the entire formal communication which is happens in the organization, that is happening in a written form, written documentary forms. That is what called formal communication, which is meant for the official purposes. Then informal communications are the unofficial communications or the unofficial conversations which happen. Suppose at the lunch table, we all are sitting in a place and we are talking, we are discussing something. So, it is not a official communication. Suppose gossiping, in many times we all are sitting some places, we are talking here and there. So, gossiping when it happens, these all are informal communications which generally happens within the organization as well as outside the organizations. That like here there is no official you know directions will be there, official orders will be there. Only we are talking with each other and we are collecting some information about some incidences or some discussions. So, those are called the informal communications. Then coming to the second form of communication is oral and written communications. So, here the oral communication is generally happens, it is partly you can say official communication. Many times we are directly face to face communications happen. So, when we are saying something, Mr. X you do this work, like directly you are instructing someone to do the work. So, in that case you are speaking to a person who is and expecting that the work has to be done, like the oral instruction is given. When you are giving some speech, when you are addressing people officially, when you are handling meetings, then when you are interacting with different people, when you are talking to the clients. So, these are what oral in oral communications, which also requires the skill, because many times we can get the business proposals, we can convince the people through orally, because whatever written communication is there, when you are talking to someone, when you are expressing your feelings to someone, when you are try to convince the other party regarding the business, then it is all about your skill how to convince the other party, because other party may not know you. So, in business dealings you have to learn that skill, how to talk to people, how to convince the people over telephone, how to deal the how to go for the business dealings while the client will be there, how to talk to them. So, these are all the most important aspect which lies with the oral communication. It requires systematic talk, it requires your language, it requires the wordings you are using, it requires your expressions, how you are expressing, it requires how you are what is your body language, how you are behaving in front of a new person. So, many aspects are coming into that, where your oral expressions are highly essential. So, then written communications, as you all know, that this letter, memo, reports, annual reports, circulars, notices, brochures, everything are coming under the written documentations. Every organization, when the interdepartmental coordination happens, when the official notices are coming, when the annual reports are prepared, it requires some written informations, and the written communication is basically done by the organizations. Coming to non-verbal and verbal communication. Under non-verbal communication, it includes the gestures, body language. Suppose now I will just stop talking and I will see like this. Suppose like when I am not saying anything, that is a gesture which I am doing. like suppose I will be surprised like that. So, in that way when someone expressing when showing the gesture to other person like without speaking anything like that, those are called the non-verbal postures, which is also communicating something. And those gestures, body movements, signs, symbols like pictures, those are taken as the non-verbal communication. Like you must be seeing the different companies, they are having their logo. By seeing the logo we can be able to know that this is the particular company's logo. So, in that way the non-verbal communication is highly essential. And verbal communication is like it includes all the spoken words, interactions and speaking. When you are talking to someone, when you are expressing, when you are passing on any messages, when you are using the languages to express the message, all are the verbal communications which are happens in our day to day life. And the managers must learn how to use all this speaking terms in a proper manner. Unless until they have that skill, it is very difficult to handle people. Then intrapersonal and interpersonal communications. Interpersonal communication is a concept like where it basically when the individual talks with himself. Like when in many times you must be experiencing when you are sitting alone, you are thinking something, we are also talking with ourselves. Like suppose before giving a presentation, we are practicing that presentation within ourselves. We are like how to start the speech, how to the flow of speech will be there, and at the end what need to be told, everything we are orienting in the mind. That is what called intrapersonal communication. We are talking with ourself only. So, individual whatever like before going to the examination, you must be experiencing that you are like in your own way you are talking to practicing your study. So, that is what that is called the intrapersonal communication, which happens with himself only. Then interpersonal communication is what? It is the communication between two persons, friends, circles and colleagues. Like when you are talking to the other people, that is called the interpersonal communications. Besides that, in the organization there are three communications generally happens. Like at the organizational level, there are three forms of communication generally happens. One is the downward communication, where in downward communication like from top to the bottom, from senior level official to the lower level officials, the order the communication passes from top to bottom. In the upward communication, from the subordinates to the top level, any information which is flows from the upward from the top, from the bottom to the top, that is what called the upward communication. In the horizontal communication, when it is happening within the same department and same category of the officers, that is what the horizontal communication which happens within the organizations. So, these are all about the different forms of communication process. Let us now discuss regarding the different communication barriers, because whatever the communication we are doing or we are exchanging our ideas, exchanging our information, it faces a lot of problems while we are talking to others, while you are expressing your thoughts to the others, or you are passing any information to others. Those barriers are divided into different categories. First is your socio-psychological barriers, language barriers, physical barriers, organizational barriers and personal barriers. Let us understand how these conditions is basically hampers in the proper organizational communication or the individual communication. Suppose coming to the psychological barrier. So, how this psychological barrier generally happens? when suppose you know, many times you must be experiencing like something is being told to you, but you are not in that condition to listen to that particular communication. It means your mind is somewhere, your mind is not there, and we generally says that I am little absent minded today. So, so here it means your mind is preoccupied with something else, your mind, you are thinking something else, you are not listening to the speaker. So, here the preoccupation of the mind is the greatest barrier while the communication is generally happens between the two people. If one will be in the preoccupied condition, then he may not be able to express the things properly, and he may not be able to receive the communications properly. That is what called preoccupied preoccupation of the mind, which is mentally is not ready to accept the communication. Then second aspect is the capability of the sensory organs. If your sensory organs are not okay, they suppose you are having some problem, then you may not be able to communicate properly. Suppose you are having some teething problem, or you know, vocal problem, or you are not having good listening skill, listening ability, then only the communication also hampers. Then negative attitude of the individual. Many times we never likes to listen to others. So, that is a negative attitude of the individual, which generally with the people. If that is existing with the people, then they may not be listen to the to others who are what is being told to them. And many times this due to inattentiveness, many times due to inattentiveness, it is not possible for us to receive the information which is being told to us. So, inattentiveness is one of the major reason of psychological reason where the communication is getting hampered. And last aspect, you can say premature evaluation. Before listening to the communication, we are evaluating, we are giving the opinions. That is a very wrong symptom of the individual, that we never listen to something and we express something. So, in that case, this psychological barrier is generally acts as a major barrier to the individual in the communication process. Coming to the social barriers. In social barriers, when people are differing in the value system, they never you know, like if they are not accepting the social aspect, like the cultural aspects, then the communication problem arises. People are very much orthodox in that way, that this is our culture and this should be done, like we will not listen to others. So, in that case, the communication problem arises. Then lack of mutual understanding. If both the party is not in a good talking terms, and they never understands each other what they wanted to pass on the message, then the communications is getting hampered. And then fear of criticism. Many times the subordinates they never expresses anything to the seniors, because of they feel that if they will say something, then the senior manager will criticize them. So, that is the biggest challenge. So, due to fear of criticism, they never expresses, they never come forward to say something. Then the status problem, in the communication process, when the senior managers are you know, holding different positions at different levels, they never try to express something to the people, because they feel that the ego basically dominates them, because due to the status symbol they never expresses anything. So, these are certain, you know, the social constraints, constraints through for which the communication is generally not happens in a proper way. These are the social barriers. Coming to the language barrier. In the language barrier, people generally fails to communicate, because due to lack of information related to a particular information or particular subject. Though they are not very much thorough about that, they could not be able to inform that. Then second aspect is, many times a single word is used for different meanings. If you do not have the adequate knowledge regarding the using of those words, then you will lacking in the communicating, you will be lack in the communicating to the people. So, then in other way, this language barrier is also creates obstacle, because many times we are not having good hold regarding the pronunciation, regarding the expression of the words, regarding the how to use that words, many times how to use the language in the proper manner, that becomes an obstacle to the people to express the express their ideas. Then poorly expressed message, poorly expressed message. So, here like when any message which is not properly properly you can say written or properly thought of, then that message cannot be passed on, that message cannot be passed on. That is how poor design of message becomes an obstacle. Many times we thought many ideas at a time, but we cannot express it to the other people. So, that is what called the poor expression of the message. Then faulty translation of a message, when the message is not properly understood by the receiver, then automatically that will be a faulty translation, and when that will be transmitted to the other person, then it hampers in the proper communication, that will hamper the message formulation, and that will not reaching to the receiver. Then many times people are not aware about the technical terms. Suppose for example, suppose the senior manager say that Mr. Sanjay, you just report me at EOD. So, Sanjay had listened that Sanjay understood that he has to report, but what is the meaning of EOD? He could not be able to understand. So, that is the end of the day. It means unless until he know about this, what is the meaning of this EOD, what exactly his senior had said to him, then he could not be able to reply to that, he could not be able to do that work. So, many technical terms are there where the subordinates and the senior officers, they must be aware about those technical terms, and that will help them in good communication. Then poor expression skills, if the individual, if the employees are not having good communication skills or expression skills, then they could not be able to communicate easily to the senior bosses as well as the colleagues in their workplaces. These are basically the language barriers which are generally happens with the people. Coming to the physical barriers means it is the environmental barriers which generally creates hurdles, or which generally creates problem in the communication process. Basically the noise and disturbances, if while communicating with each other, if any noise is there in the environment, then it distracts the communication process. And many times we are talking to the people over phone, over video chatting and all. If any technical problem will be there, then we may not be able to communicate to the people. Those are called the physical barriers in the communication process. Then coming to the organizational barriers. Besides this, the organizational barriers are there, which one manager, you can say the manager has to understand about these organizational barriers. What basically plays the important role in communicating people, and what creates the barrier in communicating people in the organizational environment. The first aspect is the manager generally fails to communicate while the appropriate message to the subordinate is getting prepared. If the manager is not ready to pass on the message to the subordinate, then he generally fails to communicate this message to the subordinate. So, message formulation is most important. How to pass on the message to the subordinate? Clear cut language, simple language must be used, and simple terms should be used which is understandable, which should need to be understood by the subordinates. Then organizational policy, organizational rules, regulations, status relationships are the major you can say the major stumbling blocks for the organizational communication. In many organizations there is the policy not to pass on the message to others. In many companies it is even clear instruction is there that whatever salary people are getting at different in private companies, whatever salary different people are getting, that should not be communicated to the people. It means the financial secrecy is maintained. So where organization policy plays an important role in breaking the you can say in creating obstacle for passing on information related to clients, related to business activities, related to financial status. They are basically the major stumbling block. Then organizational rules, whatever rules they have to the organizations are following, depending on the rules, which information needs to be communicated, which information needs to be kept secret. That is also creating the barrier in communicating to the people. So, these are all the organizational barriers in the communication process. Now let us understand what is the personal barrier of an individual, how the individual facing generally faces problem in communicating to the different work platforms, or you can say communicating himself. So, in that case basically the attitudes, the behavioral problems, lack of time, workload conditions, work pressure, and basically the knowledge factor, experiences. If the individual will not have all these things, if he is not aware of all these things, he is not efficient enough to handle all these factors, then the communication is not possible by the senior managers. These aspects are basically creates the problem while creates problem to pass on the message to the subordinates or to communicate with the other people, because mentally they got tired. So, how to communicate? So, basically the workload, if someone will be engaged with a lot of workload, then he could not be able to express. Like for example, in IT industries, in IT companies, when someone is sitting for doing the programming, constantly his mind is like he has to concentrate in developing the programmings, and in that way, during that time, if anyone will be distracting or anyone want to pass on the message, then he may not be receiving that. So, workload is a major factor, work pressure is a major factor, and attitudes like status symbols, they do not want to, due to status they do not want to communicate to the people. So, these are certain personal barriers are there, where the people are not been able to communicate with the common people. So, these are all about the obstacles generally faced by the faced in the organizations as well as in the day to day life, and if those barriers will be taken care, then one can go for an effective communication. So, let us understand how to overcome this communication barriers. Like right mindset is required for the proper communication to the other party. Then you have to be very much attentive while you are communicating to the other person. Then your sensory skills, like nowadays you must be knowing that all the executives now they are given the training regarding improving the listening skills. As an individual, our tendency is we never listen to others, like we never listen to others, we never concentrate to listen to others. So, in that case now the managers are given the training how to improve the listening skills, how to improve the listening skills, so that they can listen properly and they can execute the work in a proper manner. That is how, so you have to go for improving the sensory skills. Then positive attitude towards the message. Whatever message being told to someone, so you need to accept that message with a proper mind, so that the communicator should understand that my message has been received by the receiver, and accordingly you have to reply immediately, because this is a greatest task in the organizations. Unless until you reply back to the message, then there will be no communication between the two party. It means you are not responding. So, here the positive attitude towards the sender must be there. then have the open mind, or the whoever is listening or whoever wanted to pass on the message, he must have the open mind during the communication. Suppose someone is listening the message, he must concentrate, he must give concentration on the message giver, so that he can understand the message what is being told to them. Then appropriate expression of the language. So, here the expression of the language is like the wordings, the terms that must be appropriately used, that must be appropriately managed, so that will help the sender and receiver to understand each other properly. And the most important aspect for the effective communication is use of the media. So, what is the channel you are using? Like channel means whether you are you wanted to go, pass on the message through written documents, or you wanted to give interact directly, or you wanted to pass on the message through email, or you wanted to pass on the message through over phone. What is the media you are selecting to pass on the message? Because media plays the most important role to transmitting the message to the other person. Then choosing the non-verbal communication, like your facial expressions, your body language. So, in which way, suppose you must be aware about a particular attitude of your father. When your papa is very angry, he will be coming with a different footsteps to the home. So, you will be getting aware that today papa is very angry. Suppose his face is not very well, so you must be seeing that papa is under pressure and he is not ready to talk now. So, your facial expression, your body language, your movement of the hands, legs and face, that will also reflecting some information to the other person. So, in that way one has to understand how to use it. In organization, this is most essential to also use these non-verbal expressions. Basically, in the army troops, these non-verbal expressions and sounds basically used for the for coordination purposes to manage different communications. Then understanding the feedback. When the receiver is receiving the message, he has to give the feedback to the sender. Feedback means the reply he has to send it to the sender. So, that is how, unless the reply is given to the sender, then it will not be the proper communication will not happen between the two parties. Then last is, you have to, while you are doing the communication, if you try to make an effective communication, then you have to remove the physical barriers. Suppose any noise will be there, then suppose any mechanical problem will be there or technical problem will be there, then you have to find out the place where the effective communication can done, or you have to remove those things, make the environment smooth while you are communicating to the different places or communicating to the different languages. So, this effective communication, like after overcoming these barriers, you can go for a effective communication, and you have to depend on certain factors which will help you to send the message in a right direction. So, let us understand what are the essentials of effective communication process. So, first of all, the sender must be having the clarity in idea and expression. When someone wanted to pass on the message, when someone wanted to send some message, he must be having the clear cut idea. He must be thorough about what he wanted to say, whom he wanted to going to speak, and what content he has to pass on to the other person. Unless the clarity of expression is there, then he is not he is not in a proper condition to pass on the message. So, it is highly essential to formulate the message with a clear cut expressions. Then adequacy of the message, how much message you wanted to pass on, is it a single sentence or is it a multiple instructions or a single instruction, you have to find out what are the adequacy, is it very lengthy, is it very short and simple. So, those things need to be taken care while you wanted to make it an effective communication. Then appropriate time span, when you are passing on the message, how much time it will take, whether immediately it can be told, whether 1 hour you will want, whether half an hour you will want, what is the time span and how much time it will take to reach to that person, that has to be taken care in the effective communication. Then right words to be used to communicate the message. Unless you pick up the right word, unless you pick up the appropriate word for the individual, then that message will not be communicated. So, here let me give you here one example. When the senior managers, they handles the subordinates in the different workplaces or operational areas, many times they use the slangs to them, like unless until they use the slangs, then people may not, the workers may not be able to understand the language or understands the instructions. So, that is why in many cases the senior managers, they bound to use the slangs while they are handling different workers at different workplace. So, this is also a right, those are also, you can say, the right wordings to make them understand that how to do the work. So, many times right terms means it is not be very beautiful, strong and very expressive terms. It means which is appropriate. You have to select the word which is appropriate to the individual or appropriate for the other person, where the other person can understand. Suppose they can, if someone understands Telugu, then you have to talk in Telugu. Suppose someone understands Hindi, then you have to talk in Hindi. But suppose someone understands English, then you have to use English. So, in that case you have to use the pick up the terms or the words properly, which need to be present in such a way the other person can easily understand what message they wanted to what message my senior boss is giving to me, that has to be understood properly. So, right words needs to be used for the effective communication process. Then good listening ability, as we have discussed here, like good listening ability is highly essential for the different organizational purposes. Unless until someone develops this good listening ability, he could not be able to get the message, understands the message what is being told to the person. Listening ability is highly essential. So, now let us understand the communication network. How this communication is basically happens between the different work groups or the you can say the employees or the subordinates. There are two ways of communicating people with each other. Generally people develops a system through which people communicates or pass on the messages to each other. So, that there are two styles of networking system is there. One is the formal communication network, another is the informal communication network, because in every organization certain informations are basically passes through formal ways, and certain informations are basically passes through informal channels. So, what are those channels? Let us understand and how it is basically happens. So, in formal network system, there are 5 systems generally exist in the within the organizations. One is the single chain, then wheel, circular, free flow and inverted V. Coming to the single chain system, here the one superior is there and who basically communicates with the subordinate who is under him. So, in the same way, like he communicates to the subordinate, next he has to pass on the message to the next subordinate, like that in the single chain. So, the message is passes from top to bottom to the lower. This is the single strand communication system. So, there is no other people is involved into the in this type of communication network, because people generally wanted to get the information from their senior bosses, but in the single strand system only the senior boss is responsible for the system, and they are basically passes the information to the immediate subordinate. Coming to the wheel system, here all subordinates they can they can basically talk with each other, and they collects the information from one superior in the wheel system, like one superior who basically communicates to the different subordinates in the wheel system. Like 4 people are there, but they are getting the instruction from a single person. Coming to the circular system, in the circular communication, like the boss says, the once the information comes to the subordinate, it passes to each, like in the same horizontal place where people are sitting, like in the banks you might be seeing in the front office offices, like people are sitting in the same platform, in the same department they all are sitting. When any information comes, it will be circulated in the circular manner. That is what the circular channel through which this formal communication generally communicated. Any official communication is basically passes on. Then coming to this, this is the system through which the free flow communication in generally happens. Anyone can communicate with each other, any one of the place who can communicate with each other. Any officers who is sitting at different places, at any point of time they can communicate with each other. This is called the free flow system of communication. Then the last one is the inverted V. Here in this case only the immediate superior and immediate subordinate can be communicated. After the communication happens, then he can also communicate to the senior bosses. So, the immediate superior has to be always in contact with them, and that has to be again communicated. That is what the inverted V system. So, these 5 are the formal way through which official informations are circulated in the organizations. Coming to the informal system. In the informal system, this is the most important communication channel, which is known as called the grapevine. Like the grapes, like people are just like the grapes, like suppose one came to know about the information and he will spread the message throughout the office. So, like that is where the most you can say the dangerous dangerous informal system, where people are just getting the information only the mouth, you can say the gossip, or they get the information and passes immediately. It spreads like anything. Like even though suppose tomorrow is a holiday, but it was not declared holiday, and there is a chance of declaration of holiday. Before declaration, someone will announce that, someone will say that tomorrow is a holiday, that will spread to the entire office, and that can be easily done, which is basically known as the grapevine communication, where there is no official communication, there is no official notice, but people get connected with the connected immediately, and people will get the information immediately, which is not very much, sometimes it is not good for the organizations, but many times it is also used for the positive aspect, that suppose suppose to bring any discipline, suppose manager wanted to pass on some information, suppose to bring any change, before bringing the change, the information unofficially passes amongst the people. So, it helps in many ways, this grapevine helps in many ways to handle different situations. Coming to the informal system also, there are again 4 systems. So, one is the single strand. Here in the single strand informal system, one person tries to find out the information by using other people, like directly they never communicate, they never wanted to pass on the message, they try to get the information by using many other intermediaries, then they have to pass on the message, that is what called the single strand message. But the distance is in between two people, like many other people are there, through them the information is getting passed. Then gossip is one of the major informal communication network, where people generally gossips at the lunch table, where people generally gossips when the boss is absent in the offices, and it happens like many people from different places, they come to one place and they generally talks about different things. That is what through the informations are circulated. So, gossip is one of the major one of the form of the informal communication. Then probability, in probability condition, in probability condition, what happens, like suspecting something, people generally communicates with the different people generally communicates related to the related to different places, and randomly people are talking to different cases in the informal communication, means like from one people from one department, other people from other department, where they are communicating at different places. Suppose someone is passing through a department, he says something to that person, when he had gone to a lunch place, he had said something. So, they will not find out one place to communicate certain message in one place. On the way or randomly they just crosses to each other, and they see each other, then they will pass on the message. So, they will not find out any one place where the message can be communicated properly. Then last one is the cluster. Cluster is a very secret group, you can say, like when people trust to the other person, then only they communicate, otherwise they never communicate the secrecy of the organization or any information they wanted to pass on. So, these are all informal, you can say the informal channels through which any message is basically circulated in the organizations. So, as a manager, one has to identify where is the form, because as a manager everyone is aware about the formal communication channels, but it is most essential to understand like what are the informal communication channels are there, who are the basic where the places are there where the informal communication is generally happens. They try to understand, then only they understand about the people's attitude, people's behavior, people's reactions towards any change, like if any secrecy of the company is coming out, then that can only be on that information can only be got through this information informal communication channels. And this informal communication channels can be used to implement certain disciplinary actions, as well as also and also to get some crucial informations about the organizations. Suppose someone is doing some mistake, someone is doing some problem to the organization, that information you can get it from the informal channels. So, it is essential to understand what are the informational channels are exist in the organizations. So, this is all about the communication process, communication networks, how to go for the effective communication, what are the communication barriers. As a manager, if you can have the knowledge regarding all these components, then you can handle your organization in a better manner. With this, we are completing this topic. Thank you. Bye bye.